Duck Dynasty patriarch Phil Robertson has passed away, a devastating loss that was quietly confirmed by someone who knew him not just as a public figure, but as family, his daughter-in-law, Corey Robertson. For over 3 decades, Corey has been married to Willie Robertson, Phil's son, and in a solemn yet grateful tone, she took to Facebook this past Sunday to share the sad news. In her words, Phil was a man of God, someone who never feared the end of life, because to him, death was not a departure, but a return to the kingdom of heaven, a home he spoke about often, not just in sermons or interviews, but in every moment he lived, whether around family or in front of a national television audience. It was a message he repeated time and again. No matter the setting, this world is not our home. The news didn't come as a complete shock to those closest to the family. Still, it has shaken fans and followers around the world who watched Phil transform from a rugged, bearded duck hunter into a television icon, religious figurehead, and at times, a lightning rod for controversy. Corey expressed deep gratitude for the prayers and support the family has received, promising that even in Phil's absence, the Robertson family intends to carry forward his legacy, not just his public persona, but the deep, sometimes polarizing beliefs he held and the life lessons he tried to instill in those around him. For fans of Duck Dynasty, Phil was more than a reality show character. He was the backbone of a family that felt like America's own, loud, proud, God-fearing, often funny, and never afraid to ruffle feathers. But behind the scenes, the past year had been unkind to Phil. In a revealing and emotional episode of the family's podcast, Unashamed with the Robertson Family, it was disclosed that Phil had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in December. It was a moment that felt like a curtain being pulled back on a man many had come to see as invincible. A man who had once stood in swamps and preached about eternity was now fighting a cruel degenerative illness that slowly steals away not just memories, but one's essence. The family didn't hide from the pain. They spoke honestly about the toll the illness had taken on Phil, his memory slipping, his body failing, and the unmistakable sadness of watching a once vibrant patriarch disappear into the fog of dementia. Jace Robertson, one of Phil's sons, and a familiar face from the show, had opened up about the fact that Alzheimer's wasn't the only thing his father was battling. There was also a blood disease, unnamed to the public, but relentless in its progression. The combination of the two left Phil in almost constant pain. Jace shared that his father had become frail, vulnerable, struggling even to walk without wincing in agony. For a man who once trudged through the Louisiana wilderness with a shotgun in one hand and a Bible in the other, the decline was as painful to watch as it was to experience. Phil's final days, according to family members, were defined by 2 things: pain and prayer. Even as his body failed him, Phil held tightly to his faith. Friends close to the family say he still prayed, still listened to scripture, even if he could no longer speak clearly or recall the names of those around him. In many ways, his faith became the only thing left unshaken. It was the anchor he clung to as everything else slipped through his fingers: his strength, his health, his memories. Born on April 24, 1946, in Vivian, Louisiana, Phil Alexander Robertson wasn't always the man millions would come to know on television. He was raised in poverty, no electricity, no indoor plumbing, and no television. But what he lacked in luxury, he made up for in grit. From a young age, Phil hunted and fished, learning the rhythms of the land in a way that would one day inspire an empire. He was a standout athlete, even earning a football scholarship to Louisiana Tech University, where he was the starting quarterback, backing up none other than Terry Bradshaw. But fame wasn't his calling, at least not then. Phil turned down the NFL draft, instead returning to the woods, pursuing a simpler, if more rugged, life. It was there that Phil found his true calling, not just as a hunter, but as an inventor. He created the Duck Commander duck call in 1972, building it from scratch in a small shop with his wife, Kay. It was the start of a company that would one day become a multi-million-dollar business, and the foundation for the show that would change everything. Duck Dynasty premiered on A&E in 2012, and almost overnight, the Robertsons became household names. The show chronicled their lives in West Monroe, Louisiana, full of family, dinners, duck hunts, backyard wisdom, and an unapologetic commitment to their Christian beliefs. Phil stood at the center of it all, a modern-day patriarch, complete with camouflage, a long beard, and fiery sermons. The show ran for 11 seasons, ending in 2017, but its cultural impact was undeniable. It gave Middle America a voice on television. It showed that you didn't need Hollywood polish to resonate with millions. You just needed authenticity, even if that authenticity sometimes made people uncomfortable. And Phil did just that. In 2013, his GQ interview exploded across headlines. In it, Phil made remarks about homosexuality and race that many found offensive and backward. A&E responded swiftly, suspending him from the show. But the backlash wasn't one-sided. Millions rallied behind Phil, arguing that he was simply expressing his religious beliefs. Protesters claimed his suspension was an attack on free speech. The controversy revealed the stark cultural divide in America, and solidified Phil's place as not just a reality star, but a symbol in the country's ongoing battle over faith, freedom, and social change. He was eventually reinstated, but the incident forever changed how he was viewed. To some, Phil was a prophet. To others, a provocateur. But to his family, he was just dad, or a pawpaw. He was the one who led prayers at the dinner table, who gave long-winded speeches about life and scripture, who taught his children and grandchildren to hunt, fish, and stand strong in their beliefs. Despite the controversies, despite the fame, despite the illnesses, the one thing that never wavered was Phil's commitment to faith and family. As the news of his passing continues to ripple outward, tributes have poured in. Fans have flooded social media with stories about how Phil's words touched their lives, how they found Christ because of something he said, how his unapologetic stance on Scripture gave them courage, how his TV show helped them reconnect with their own families. Others have been more critical, reminding the world of the divisive things he once said. But whether you admired him or disagreed with him, there's no denying that Phil Robertson left an imprint on American culture. In recent months, there were rumors that Duck Dynasty was set to return in a reboot by A&E. The announcement created buzz among fans, eager to see the Robertsons reunite on screen. But notably absent from the network's release was any mention of Phil. It's unclear whether his declining health prevented him from participating, or whether A&E chose to distance itself from the controversies he sparked years ago. Either way, the reboot now carries a different weight. Without Phil, it will be missing the very man who started it all. Phil Robertson died at 79. He died in the same way he lived, on his own terms, surrounded by those who loved him, and never wavering in his belief that this world was just a stop on the way to something greater. His final moments, while painful, were also peaceful. A man who had spoken so often about returning to God finally did. And as his family continues to grieve, they do so not with despair, but with the hope he instilled in them, because Phil never saw death as an end. He saw it as a homecoming. His wife of over 5 decades, Miss Kay, has not yet made a public statement, but close friends of the family say she was with him at the end, holding his hand, whispering scripture into his ear, just as she had done countless times before. Their love story, marked by struggles, infidelities, and a hard-earned redemption, was one of the most powerful parts of the Duck Dynasty legacy. Phil often credited Kay with saving his life, saying that her faith brought him out of darkness, during a period when he was drinking heavily and living recklessly. She brought him back to God, and in turn, he spent the rest of his life bringing others with him. Phil's story is one of transformation. From a poor Southern boy to a college athlete, from an alcoholic to a born-again Christian, from a duck call inventor to a cultural icon. His life was messy, complicated, inspiring, and at times infuriating. But it was never boring. And it was always real.